What we believe impacts everything that we do. How we treat other people, how we deal with disappointment, how we raise our children. Our beliefs shape our future. They actually shape the kind of people that we are becoming. The question is, what do you believe? Do you know? Are those beliefs convictions? Do you hold them lightly? Most important, where are those beliefs taking you? Because your beliefs are taking you somewhere. Next week, as I mentioned, we're launching a new 3-part message series called Believe. This fall, in part 1, we are looking at 10 key beliefs that can help us to think more like Jesus. At the beginning of the new year, we're going to be looking at 10 key practices that will help us to learn to live more like Jesus. And then after Easter, in the spring, we're going to be looking at 10 key character traits that help us to actually live and become more like Jesus. But before we begin this message, I have a question for you. And it's really, really super basic. What does it mean to believe? Seriously. We're doing this series, Believe. What does it mean to believe? Now, the answer might seem obvious, but is it really? We want to believe. As a matter of fact, we believe that we believe, but when a moment of truth comes along, when we are actually called to act on our beliefs, when, we have to get into the wheelbarrow, we're suddenly not so sure. We want to believe, but. We believe, but then this moment of truth comes along, and it just kind of calls everything we thought we believed into question. Now, that not being sure is a universal human experience, and there's a name for it. There's a word for it: doubt. Doubt is a part of life. It's a part of, it's universal, so that means that it's a part of Christian life as much as anyone else's life. It's not always a bad thing. If you believe something that's not true, doubting it is actually a positive, right? God has actually given us a gift in our capacity to doubt. God has hardwired us with this capacity to doubt. It is a kind of a gift. But unfortunately, like anything that God has given us, like any good gift, it's a gift that can be misused. We live in a culture that encourages us to doubt everything as a matter of principle. It's a philosophy of skepticism. We're taught to doubt everything as a matter of principle, or almost everything, because I don't think we're ever really encouraged to doubt the wisdom of skepticism. Nor are we often challenged to doubt our own doubts. As a matter of fact, we live in a culture where people doubt their beliefs and believe their doubts, and isn't that kind of paradoxical? It's one of our cultural blind spots, which means it's really widespread. But why are we talking about doubt in an introduction to a series called Believe? It's because most people think that there are only 2 options. Either you believe or you don't believe. Either you are a believer or a skeptic. You have faith or you doubt. It's very simple, very binary, very cut and dried, very black and white. But the truth is, it's not that simple. Because most of us actually operate on a continuum of belief, where, yeah, we believe stuff, but there's a shadow of a doubt. We find a perfect example of this in today's text from Mark chapter 9, where Jesus tells a man who has a son who's just suffering. Jesus tells him everything is possible for one who believes. And the man says to Jesus, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. See, both of them in one heart. So grateful that Mark actually shares this story, because it really does capture a truth that often goes unacknowledged or unadmitted, especially in Christian circles. The fact that whatever measure of faith we may have, Because we are fallen people living in a fallen world, and because we have limited perspectives, because we are finite, because we are not God, there is likely a part of us, and it could be just a little tiny part, or it could be big, but there is a part of every one of us that wants to believe, but doesn't, or won't, or can't, even if just a little bit. Sometimes that tiny bit of doubt is just enough to keep us from enjoying the blessings that God wants to give to us. So the question is, given the fact that we all have doubts about things, and for those of you who are following along on YouVersion, you can actually go online, take a little poll about how much do you doubt? Never? Not me? Or every so often? Or let us know what you think. What do we do with questions and doubts when they arise? Well, I think the best answer is that we do what the guy in today's text does. You honestly acknowledge it. You admit that you have questions and doubts. That's a good thing. Lord, I believe, he says, help my unbelief. That's an incredibly powerful prayer because it is a deeply honest prayer. And our prayers aren't any good if they're not really honest. They need to be honest. That prayer acknowledges the measure of faith that we have and claims that. At the same time, it demonstrates that faith by trusting whatever doubts or questions, whatever it is that we might have to God. One of my favorite authors, see, I knew you were going to say that. One of my favorite authors, Alistair McGrath, gotcha. Awesome. Alistair McGrath writes that many Christians, and I think this is true, they feel guilty about having doubts, and so they suppress them. As a matter of fact, for me to even talk about doubt, I was thinking about this. Why am I feeling a little bit anxious about this message? And it's because there are some people that think no one should have any doubts ever. We shouldn't have any questions at all. And for a pastor to talk about people having questions and acknowledging that, well, maybe they're not people of faith. You see what I'm talking about? Alistair McGrath writes that many Christians feel guilty about having doubts and they suppress them or they fear what other people will think of them, and so they keep their questions to themselves. See, part of the problem is that we confuse doubt with two kind of similar but very different things. First of all, doubt is not skepticism. The decision to doubt everything as a matter of principle. We're not talking about doubting everything as a matter of principle. We're just talking about honest questions. Second, doubt is not unbelief, the decision not to have faith. Doubt's a part of life, and it shouldn't frighten us, and it shouldn't surprise us so long as it doesn't paralyze us, so long as it doesn't take over our lives, so long as it doesn't harden into skepticism or unbelief. It's one of the things I love about this particular church, StoneBridge Community Church, is we believe in the truth of the Christian faith. We believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord. We believe that. We read the Bible and believe that it is the unique and authoritative witness to God and his works through Christ. Even though we have those convictions, we welcome people wherever they are in their spiritual journey, which means when we welcome them, we are also welcoming their questions. This is a really safe place to have questions and to raise questions. It's one of the reasons why we offer the Alpha course. It's one of the reasons why we have growth groups, message-based growth groups that we encourage people to be involved in, one of our 3 key values here at StoneBridge. The truth is, again, that Alistair McGrath puts it, here's why it's so important. A superficial faith is a vulnerable faith. A superficial faith is a vulnerable faith. I like the way Timothy Keller kind of illustrates this. He says that a faith without some doubts is like a human body without any antibodies in it. People who sort of just blithely go through life too busy or too indifferent to ask hard questions about what they believe and why they believe as they do. If you're not asking those kind of questions, you're going to find yourself defenseless against either the experience of a tragedy that doesn't square with your belief system or the probing questions of a smart skeptic. You're going to say, how can you believe that? And you're not going to be able to say anything because you never thought about it and never questioned it yourself. He says a person's faith can collapse almost overnight if she's failed over the years to listen to her own doubts. Believers should acknowledge and wrestle with doubts, not only their own, and this is cool and this is key, that we need to acknowledge and wrestle with doubts, not only our own, but our friends' and neighbors' doubts as well. That's one of the main things I do as a pastor, by the way. I just try to think, what's it like for people who don't come to church, and what kind of questions are they asking, and what kind of doubts do they have, and why is this so hard for them to accept God's love for them through Christ? Because I want to get in their skin so that I can show God's love to them and communicate to them in a language that they understand. So don't let your faith be superficial. If you're not asking questions about it, it really can be kind of superficial. You know, kids, it's great to have your kids grow up in Sunday school and, hear the stories of the Bible and everything, but there comes a time when they leave Sunday school and, middle school, high school, they head off to college, and maybe that's the first time they're asking questions, or people are posing questions that they've never thought of before, and we need to prepare them for that. And how do you do that? By thinking about this stuff. Don't let your faith be superficial. Ask questions. Think hard. Dig deep. Honestly acknowledge your questions and doubts. And if somebody brings you a question, don't think they're a bad person or, that topic is taboo. It's not. But don't stop there. Don't stop there just with the questions and doubts. Use those doubts. Leverage your doubts and questions to deepen your faith. And this is what we're going to do during this series, Believe. It's not enough just to cop to a doubt, to state, I have this reservation about this, or to pose a question. It's not enough if you just stop there. But a lot of people do. Let your doubts and questions stir your curiosity. Let your doubts and questions set you on a search for fresh insights and deeper answers. Somebody has drawn an analogy. I came across this years ago. It's an analogy drawn from commercial fishing. Years ago, people had this huge problem shipping codfish, to various places, to inland consumers, to people in other countries, and so on. And here's why it was such a problem. They discovered that if you catch cod and freeze them right away, they lose their flavor. Their texture just is horrible. So they decided to ship live cod. They discovered shipping live cod is virtually no better because the fish in these holding tanks just turn soft and mushy, which leads to them, when you actually then cook them, the texture's wrong and they're flavorless. So somebody suggested that they throw catfish into the tanks of the live cod. Because catfish and cod are natural enemies. Now somebody's sitting there and they're a skeptic. They're going, catfish are freshwater and cod are saltwater. How's that? There are saltwater catfish too. Good question. See, I'm paying attention. In order to survive, the cod have to, we're kept in constant motion because the catfish are there, so they have to kind of keep moving and everything. As a result, when they arrived, at their destination, they were in flavorful peak condition, ready, for the fish and chips. There you go. And by the way, I wanted to make sure that this story, I know that everybody, looks stuff up that I say on Google, and that's good, that's cool. That's why I do all these YouVersion notes, so I do the work for you. You can look it up. And one of the really interesting things I came across as I was kind of doing background research on this particular story about catfish and codfish is that there is a huge discussion on the internet where people are going back and forth about the origins of this story, and is it true, and where did it come from, and the nuances of it, and so on. It's great fun. You should use YouVersion. It's great. Anyway. There is a way in which our doubts and our questions and our here's the point of the story. There's a way in which our doubts and our reservations and our questions are like the catfish. Because if you're not thinking, your beliefs are just going to get flabby. I don't know any other word for it. But our doubts and our questions and stuff, and the questions that other people ask us, we shouldn't be afraid of that stuff because it keeps us healthy and moves us forward and moves us deeper in our faith. It's strange, but it's true. Doubt, now again, not skepticism, not just doubting everything as a matter of principle, but honest doubt, not unbelief, honest doubt is proven to be one of God's best tools for producing mighty men and women of faith throughout history. Where did the great confessions of the church come from? Where did the great creeds come from? Where did the Reformation come from? And where did a Great Awakening and all this stuff come from? It came from people doing two things. People posing questions, the culture posing questions, and the people of God being people of prayer and responding in faith in a deep, deep way. The dad in today's text prays, Lord, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. Thomas, this guy Thomas, one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. What's his nickname? What do we call him now? Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas had questions and doubts. He said, unless, the disciples are saying, Jesus is risen and stuff, and no, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, I will not believe. And you know what? When Jesus returned, he didn't scold or chide Thomas. He said, why didn't you believe? Everybody else did. You must be a really bad person. You know what Jesus does instead? He says, go ahead. Take a look. Put your finger in my side. Jesus honored the question. That ought to tell us something. That ought to tell us something. And by the way, it is Thomas, as you read through the New Testament, it is Thomas who gives the clearest exclamation, the clearest declaration of who Jesus is. Because it's in response to Jesus caring for him in this way that when he recognizes that Jesus has been raised from the dead, he falls to his feet and he says, my Lord and my God. His doubts and his questions led him to a place of unprecedented spiritual insight. And that's what I mean when I say use your questions, use your doubts to pave the way to a deeper faith. And we get to do that all together here in this series. What does that deeper faith, what does a deeper faith look like? What are we shooting for here? When the series believe that starting next week, we, as I mentioned, are going to learn how to think more like Jesus, learn how to live more like Jesus, and learn how to be more like Jesus. What that means, if you think about it, is that this is going to be a series about life transformation. That is why we are here as a church, by the way, life transformation. You know how auto companies turn out cars? And you know how Apple turns out pencils now? Do you see that? The Apple Pencil, anyway. But they turn out iPhones and iPads and all this kind of computers. What's the church turn out? The church is being used by God to turn out transformed lives. That's what we measure. That's what we celebrate. That's what is marked when a person is baptized. That's why we're here, for life change and for life transformation. And so this whole series is an invitation to have your life change, an invitation to think and to live and to be more like Jesus. And people are looking for role models all over the place. Can you think of a better role model than Jesus? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we're going to be the savior of the world. We don't get to do that. That job's taken. But to surrender our lives in the same way that Jesus did his so that the Holy Spirit could live in us and work through us and change us, even as we are called to help bring this message of transformation to other people. So the question is this: what can we do to get the most out of this series? I'm going to give you 5 quick suggestions, and you can do most of these before you leave this evening. Very first thing is I want to invite you to pick up a copy of the book Believe before you leave today. I know some of you have gotten your copies already. These things, I was really surprised by this. I looked at the back. These things list for $24.99. We're making them available to you guys for $10. So it's a really, really great deal. You can get it on your Kindle, I think, for even less if you have one of those. This book is incredible. It includes very, very carefully selected scriptures. They're arranged topically around some key questions like, what do I believe? What do we as Christians believe? What should I do? How am I supposed to live? And who am I becoming? It is brilliantly arranged. And each chapter asks a key question, explores a key idea, and offers a key verse. And like I said, we're able to get this thing to you at this amazing discount. Pick it up and read chapter 1, Who is God, for next week, because that's what I'm going to be talking about. Second, since I brought it up, make a commitment to attend worship each weekend. Each week, what we're going to be doing in worship is looking at the chapter that you have been reading and addressing some of the questions that you guys might have about the material. I'm going to try to anticipate some of that. I'm going to try to give my own take on this material so that you guys have another perspective to discuss in your growth groups. You will have, as you do every single week, you will have custom-made YouVersion notes that you can use in your growth group. By the way, for those of you who are using YouVersion notes, do you know where those things come from? The pastors write them every week. After we write the message, we write those notes so that you can not only see some of the materials that we've used in putting the messages together, but so you can go deeper. Be sure to use that. If you miss a message, you're not here for a weekend, you can watch it on our website, download it on our podcast, or watch it on YouTube. I just want to say one thing, though. Don't treat YouTube or iTunes as a substitute for worship. And I know some people do. It's not worship. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at in this book. And one of the things you will learn in this book is that nowhere in the Bible does it say that sitting at home watching your TV set is worship. Worship is a corporate deal. We worship together. Yet you can get something, I get it, you can get something out of watching a message on TV, but the church family of which we are all a part, need to think about this. If you're not here, you're missed. You are missed. And by the way, if you're not here, sometimes you miss stuff because we do crazy things on occasion. If you miss a week, we get it. If you don't have to miss a week, just want to encourage you to be here. Third, don't do this by yourself. Believe is meant to be experienced in community. When I say community, I don't just mean in the worship experience too. It starts with worship, but it unfolds in our growth groups where we get to interact not only with the material, but with other people. We have 3 values here at StoneBridge Community Church. Our mission, our vision is to reach the lost, to make disciples, to send them out. Our values are worship and community life and community service. When you go to a growth group, that's where this group life, community life thing happens. When you go to a growth group, you're exposed to other people's perspectives, which means that they might be able to help you see things in a new way. But just in case you think that it's all about you and the reason you go to a growth group is so other people can help you see stuff in a new way, when you go to a growth group, you might be able to help somebody else see something in a new way too. And that's really cool when that happens. Because sometimes you can say something, and to you it's the most obvious thing in the world. And depending on where the other person is, they might hear you say something, and they'll just go, I never thought of it that way before. That changes everything. Wouldn't you like to have that happen? Happens all the time in growth groups. Only one thing, though. If you want it to happen, you have to be in one. So get in a growth group. If you haven't signed up for a growth group already, by the way, we have more groups going on during this particular study than we ever have had in the history of StoneBridge Community Church. And if you have not signed up for a growth group yet, as soon as worship is over, you can go out to the growth group table and sign up. Right, Barbara? Barbara Waite will be there. By the way, speaking of not doing this by ourselves, one of the really cool things about this study is not only are we as adults doing it together here in worship and then in our growth groups, in Sunday school, the kids in the church, the little kids, starting with the little kids, all the way through middle school, high school, and college, they are all looking at exactly the same stuff, only age-appropriate versions of it. So there is a student version of Believe, and there is a kids version of Believe, and there's a nursery version of Believe. So if you have kids, be sure you can pick up your books and your kids' books at the hub after worship. Fourth, you want to really get a lot out of this series, invite your neighbors, your friends, and your family to join us on the journey. Last week, I mentioned to you, we sent out over 40,000 cards. And the reason we sent those out isn't just so people in your neighborhood would get those cards, but so you would have a conversation starter. So that you could say, did you get the card? That's my church. What's your opinion of grilled cheese and cupcakes? You know, just a way to start a conversation. Did you get the card? What do you think? That's my church. If you like to check it out, we want to make it easy for you. So that's what we're doing here. One other thing that most people don't think about, we all always think about and frankly feel guilty about, inviting or not inviting people to worship. Think about your growth group too, to invite people to that. Because for some people, it might be a lot easier for them to go over to your house for coffee than it would be for them to come into church. So think about inviting them to that. Fifth and finally, if you want to get the most out of this series, here's the key. Apply it. Apply it to your life. When you learn something, live it. You know, Jesus says, blessed are those who hear these words of mine and do them. Actually put it into practice. Believe this series is not an info dump. I mean, if you want to treat it like an info dump, you can. That's not what its intention. It's not just to, fill your head with theological ideas. It's about life change. It is an invitation for you to learn to think like Jesus and to live like Jesus, to become like Jesus. The dad in today's text says to Jesus, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. And like that guy, you might find yourself right now pulled in two different directions by something, some problem, a struggle with a relationship, something's not going right at work, money problems, health. Whatever doubts or questions or reservations you might have, I want to invite you today, I want to invite you every day during this series to acknowledge those questions, to admit whatever doubts you have, and to choose, make a conscious choice to trust God. Faith isn't the absence of doubt. You know what faith is? Faith is trusting God even with doubts. Because people who trust God, you know what they discover is that God is trustworthy. When God makes promises, God keeps promises. And the more we truly trust God, the more we really trust God, the more we discover, oh my gosh, living this way really does make a difference. Choose to trust God. Let's take a look at the screen. This is a Celtic prayer, and what I'd like to do is we read this Celtic prayer together, may the words that we speak remind us of what it means to believe. Let's take a look. Lord, you've always given bread for the coming day, and though I am poor, today I believe. Lord, you have always given strength for the coming day, and though I am weak, today I believe. Lord, you have always given peace for the coming day, and though I am of anxious heart, today I believe. Lord, you have always kept me safe in trials, and now tried as I am, today I believe. Lord, you have always marked the road for the coming day, and though it may be hidden, today I believe. Lord, you have always lightened this darkness of mine, and though the night is here, today I believe. Lord, you have always spoken when time was ripe, and though you may be silent now, today I believe.